All right, tennis fans. This is Don Lang, and this is Talking Tennis with the Donnie Lama with my guest, Dave the Kaz Kozlowski from Inside Tennis with the Kaz. Well, Kaz, you might say that's quite a name for a podcast, Talking Tennis with the Donnie Lama. How did that come to be? Well, the short story on that is a really good friend just was amazed with the knowledge that I'd had of tennis going back
I'm
to
always
the 1920s.
amazed with that line. Always.
So if you remember the scene with Bill Murray in Caddyshack, and he says, that he met with the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama gave him total consciousness. So he said, so I got that going for me. Well, I have all this information of tennis dating back to the 1920s. My father, Ball Boy Davis Cup at Orange Lawn in the 20s. So, it just made sense. I thought it was a fun thing to do. And it really is just, hey, I do have a lot of information to save. And it's an honor to work with you, Kaz. You were one of the first 17 USPA Master Pros. You were in Tennis Magazine with lessons on a regular basis. They were plastered in the walls on the Laurel Oak Pro Shop. I was proud to be your friend. I've known you for almost 40 years now, Kaz.
Absolutely. All I can say is I've been very, very fortunate to have somebody take me by the hand and get me into this thing. And from there on, it all was good stuff. People have been very good. I've been very lucky also, Don.
Hey, fundamentally sound. I always say Kaz always taught fundamentally sound, and it was evident with his three children. All played Division I college tennis, and they had beautiful strokes. The way that the game's supposed to be
Tennis
taught.
is an art.
What?
Let's show off the art.
Absolutely. So I thought maybe tennis fans out there in the podcast world might want to know, hey, when did tennis start really getting popular? And it really goes back to the roaring 1920s, which is called the golden era of sport. Kaz, this first episode, we're going to talk about tennis from the 1920s to the late 1960s and how it operated and who were the stars of the game back then. But it was the golden era of sports, Babe Ruth in baseball, Jack Dempsey in boxing. But there was a guy in tennis that was considered the absolute hero of American tennis. Who was that, Kaz?
Well, I would say the genius of the game. And I'm going to question you a bit or two. Bill Tilden, Philadelphia background, of course, played at the University of Pennsylvania.
Did.
But your family's not used to playing number 6 in the lineup. Tilden, when he was playing at U of P, was number 6 in the lineup. The question for Don Lang, in 2 years, where was this guy playing? What was his rank 2 years after playing number 6 at Penn?
He was one of the best players in the world. He spent a whole winter practicing in an indoor gym to improve his backhand. I have his book over in my tennis library there, and it's the How to Play Tennis book. And then he went on to do incredible stuff and win U.S. national
But I'm
championships.
asking you, what was he ranked or where was he playing?
He was playing, I think, at Germantown Cricket Club, where they used to have the U.S. Nationals before it moved to Forest Hills.
I know this guy, he can get out of any question he doesn't quite know. So I'm going to tell you. And
Okay, I
tell
want to
your
know,
audience.
Kaz.
He went from number 6 at the University of Pennsylvania. 2 years later, he's not number 6 at Penn anymore. He's number 1, not at Penn, 1 in the world. That will never, ever happen, not even in your world book of historic stuff. It's not going to happen. But Tilden was a genius. He wrote for the New York Times. He performed on Broadway. And you mentioned he would work out during the winters where
Yes.
there was no tennis. He's in New England on an indoor court playing locals like you
Yeah.
and losing to them because what's he doing?
He's working on his backhand.
And his weakness at the time. How many guys would have that confidence to go in and lose to good players at a regional? Didn't bother him at all.
No, and the things that he did, I mean, as the Davis Cup the leader of the Davis Cup team. I guess it was Little Bill Johnson played with him, and they played the. Everybody knows Lacoste sportswear now. Well, there was René Lacoste and Jean Brutera and Musketeer, but they had some great Davis Cup ties. France against the U.S. and led by Bill Tilden, and he was part of the golden era of sports in the 20s.
Tilden, after he retired, he taught tennis, and this was his motto. He'll take you as a new player under this proviso. I work with you 4 or 5 times a week, 30 minutes, a half hour. I don't want you hitting with anybody else, seeing anybody or any worse strokes, throwing off your timing. You hit only with me, and that's how he produced champions at the club level who never played before, but they hit with Tilden a half hour, maybe 4 or 5 days a week. Our friend Frank DeFord, with Sports Illustrated, wrote a 9-page supplement on what was going to be the movie Big Bill. And you know who was going to play Bill?
I read his book, Big Bill.
You read more than I do. I didn't read it, but I read about it. Roscoe Tanner was going to play Bill Tilden. Roscoe's left-handed. It's okay. We can trick shoot it. He was going to represent Tilden. People read the article in Sports Illustrated, said it's a little too sad the way his life ended.
Yeah, it was tough.
Let's not do the movie, but let's do the play. So Broadway put it together. Success, you better believe it. First guy in the audience was John McEnroe.
I have the Big Bill Tilden book by Frank DeFord because I have quite an extensive tennis library. I also have the book that he wrote on playing tennis. The same fellow that donated all these vintage rackets to me sent me the book, and it's right over there in my library. So you're going to leave with that tonight.
I will certainly be happy.
Now, we mentioned Davis Cup. We mentioned that it was the 20s was the Roaring 20s. Sports was a big thing, and tennis had quite a following. But tell me, Kaz, there was 3 or 4 players that really molded American men's tennis, at least in the 1930s. And who would you say the top players were?
The 30s, Don. That goes back a little further even than I was, but I would have to say Don Budge, thumb up on the backhand, Richards, and Vines.
Yes, I would agree with you, Kaz. They were the engines that were driving American tennis in the 30s, especially Don Budge. But I think it was it Vincent Richards was from Southern Cal and Ellsworth Vines was from the New York area. But they also played a big part as well. And Ellsworth Vines was pretty versatile and actually played the PGA championships in golf.
Our minds worked together. I was just going to say, and he had just as good of a golf career.
Yeah.
But Budge, what a treat it was for me. I actually had a chance to meet and interview him in real time, in real life. And a gentleman he was. He finished his life in the Poconos of Pennsylvania.
Right. And it was right up near Port Jervis where the states meet together. What a nice guy. He came down to the U.S. Pro Indoor. This would have been circa about 1989, 1990. And Fred Perry had come over to visit him from the UK. They actually were down in what they called the Spectrum Club. And they'd always do a kids, the top juniors and middle states exhibition between the 2 semifinals. And my son Michael was fortunate enough to be chosen for that and played with a fellow named Mike Miller from Trenton and a couple of other kids. But they got to have lunch afterwards with Fred Perry and Don Budge. No parents. They didn't want the parents there. They wanted to talk to those kids about, hey, you look like you're really into tennis. Tell me about your tennis, but tell me about what you like to do in school and what some of your goals are. And I briefly met them when they came back up to watch the matches. I had to go down and shake hands with these legends. Say it took many years, decades, for Andy Murray to be the next Brit to actually win Wimbledon. And Tim Henman gave it a real good try for many years, and others. But Buster Mottram, another one. But Fred Perry was he was something else. I was just going to say, Kaz, being a tennis historian like you are, What happened that was very unique in the 1939 Wimbledon with a fellow that we all know and loved, Bobby Riggs? What did he do?
There are stories galore on this guy, and I'll take a bit of a precious moment of your time to talk about Riggs. I did not have the chance to meet him, but second best was meeting his son. And his son wanted the world to know we know him as the gambler. And this guy was he was a hot shot. He'd go into the best clubs in the area and take these guys on, put 4 or 5 chairs against. They had to hit any chair, they win the match. It would be $1,000 or so. He never lost one of those. I talked to his grandson, who was a college player at the time. I asked him, how well would Bobby do in college? And he laughed. He said he would last 30 minutes in college, and that was not his life. But he was the entertainer, and there was no bigger entertainment than the battle of the sexes
at the Astrodome.
And Gene Scott was in the booth calling that match.
Oh, what a great guy, Gene Scott. And of course, you know, the rumor is, allegedly, Bobby Riggs, you know, bookmaking was legal in London, so you could bet on yourself. He bet that he'd win the men's singles, the men's doubles, and the mixed doubles, and allegedly won all 3 and collected over $100,000 in 1939 dollars. That's quite something. I wish I had met him too.
Well, lucky to meet his grandson and his son.
Well, Kaz, as we move into the 1940s and post World War II, because things kind of shut down during World War II. There was even a bomb was even dropped on center court by the Germans at Wimbledon. But who would you say? This up and coming guy from East Los Angeles who wasn't from much of a background, and he had a bit of a temper. You know what I'm talking about.
I do. I kind of knew him as Richard Gonzalez. And later in life he wanted to be referred to as Richard. What I remember most about him, I actually strung one of the first metal rackets that was out on the market for him when he was in Columbus, Ohio. I did get to work on a regular basis with his brother, who had a clothing line to put together the Gonzalez clothing. One of the biggest, perhaps, crimes in tennis is when Gonzalez was dominating the tour. And they wanted to make tennis more interesting for the spectators,
right.
So it was said, and they moved back the line that from where you serve 3 feet. Lawsuits were put together out there by Gonzalez.
Wow.
One stat about Gonzalez: he wins the U.S. Open on grass. How many overheads do you think he missed in the fortnight U.S. Open at Forest Hills?
I'm going to say 0.
Yes, you know the number.
Oh, this guy was an incredible player, incredible individual. And if you look at the background that he came from and pulled himself up by his, he really accomplished quite a bit. Now one guy we didn't mention from the 50s, Tony Traber. Now Tony Traber won the French Open, I think, in '54, and it wasn't until Michael Chang in '89 that another American won. And Tony Traber, I mean, a lot of people our age and younger, Kaz, know Tony Traber from being an announcer and doing the Open every year, and he was quite a player. He played college tennis, I think, at University of Cincinnati.
Absolutely. What a contributor to the game. He was playing college tennis. He was playing college b-ball.
Oh, yeah.
Tennis,
he was.
Basketball, and at the same time he was doing something on another team, the Davis Cup.
Yes.
And that's not going to happen very much again.
He was doing that. Well, Kaz, I got to tell you a real quick, short story. Now, you and I probably...
Nothing's ever short with this guy,
we,
but let's
we
hear it.
probably started tennis around the same time because we're more or less the same age. I started tennis in 1959, and at a club in North Jersey, up 20 miles west of New York City, Beacon Hill Club. Our head pro there was the lacrosse coach at Syracuse University during the year, and his star player was a guy named Jim Brown of the Cleveland Browns. And this Buzz Seymour, he had hands that were gigantic. Now, Kaz, you've played against me more than once. The only thing Buzz Seymour did wrong was he should have drawn on that grip exactly how to turn my backhand, because every stroke was flat. He taught me Eastern forehand, and always had a problem still to this day with my backhand. But wonderful guy. But the story of this is I couldn't tell my friends that I played tennis. And why do you think that was?
Well, because it was looked upon as not a he-man sport.
Well,
I don't want to use
got
the word
that right.
sissy, but it was used back there,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you had to contend
I
with
didn't
that.
tell anybody I played tennis. Now the guys that I went to school with that belonged to the club, we didn't play tournaments, junior tournaments. We played inter-club, all the different clubs. But I literally, for years, from the time I was 8, 9 till maybe 16, I would never even breathe the word tennis because people would make fun of me. And there was different reasons for that. But the cat came out of the bag in my 9th grade junior high school yearbook. They have this picture of me, and I'm a horrible looking adolescent. And the first thing they go is tennis anyone with a question mark. I said, cat's out of the bag now.
All right. You could relax.
Yes. And I always wanted Kaz to get over to Forest Hills for the Nationals, before open tennis started in '68. I never was able to. Many friends did, and I'm sure you were over there. But boy, it changed so much, because I think when Arthur Ashe, even when he won the first open tennis, he only got a check for $12,000.
And that was with a top flight agent.
Right.
Yes.
His friend Donald Dell.
That's exactly right.
Donald
Yes.
Dell. But that's another episode to talk about Arthur Ashe and talk about our good friend Nick Bollettieri as well, because we have great anecdotes and stories over the years on both of those gentlemen.
Certainly do.
We covered a lot of great players. I hope we didn't bore our tennis podcast fans, but we're going to have more coming down the road. We have stories between. I'm going to have other guests on. Kaz has been kind enough to get me off the ground with this. So
and flying high, baby.
All my tennis friends out there and tennis industry friends, you're going to be getting this link. It was nice being with you tonight, Kaz.
Good to see you, Don. Donnie boy.
Yeah.
The Lama boy.
That's right, the Lama boy.